good morning. We want to make sure that the system is working. It usually does, but we just want to double check. Oh, it is. Okay, great. So turn that down. I really appreciate you being here today. We are going to have a wonderful conversation. Make sure the sound is good. Good. Welcome to the live series. This is the video playlist in which I offer instruction about how to deliberately create your reality so that you can experience the joy and satisfaction and sovereignty that my clients and I are experiencing too. Joy, sovereignty, these things are a natural part of who you are. Just getting comfortable in my chair. They are a natural part of who you are, but because of many distortions that exist in human civilization, it's not physical reality, it's human civilization. Because of those distortions, we tend to give up our joy, sovereignty, and empowerment in order to experience the life of a common mortal. And what this channel is all about is about giving information that allows you as a human being, you as a common mortal, to realize that your common mortalhood is not only temporary, but something that you can free yourself from. And as a result of freeing yourself from your common mortalhood, you can expand your consciousness and your awareness, expand your awareness to enable you to perceive what you really are, which is, and I know some people scoff at this, a God in human form. You are a being that is here in physical reality in order to have an experience that is assisting you in becoming more of what you are. And every point of consciousness eventually goes through this same process. A process that is being guided by both your broader perspective, which is that God in human form version of you that exists eternally and non-physical. It's guided, your trajectory here is guided by that, and also by all that is, because all that is wants you to expand into the fullest state of conscious awareness that you can come into, because by doing so, you contribute to the expanding fullness. You contribute to the expanding fullness of all that is. And of course, because we are all eternal, there is no end to this process. So it really is, this life experience really is an opportunity for you to have this human experience in the context of your eternity, and have that human experience be ultimately joyful, an expression of your empowerment, and an expression of your sovereignty. And today we're going to talk about a relatively small dimension of that, although to human beings this is a huge dimension, which is how manifestations actually work, how they happen, so that you can begin to deliberately manifest those things that you want, how to deliberately manifest those things that you want so that those things come into your experience in surprising and delightful ways, and in ways that don't require the struggle that human civilization says you have to experience in order to have what it is you want. Now, I'm presuming that because you're watching this live, you've also watched some of my other videos, particularly the Worthiness Wednesdays videos, in which I offer examples of what I'm going to talk about today. How people, my clients primarily, but also myself, how people are using what you're about to hear, among other things, to manifest really extraordinary manifestations in their lives without any effort on their part. And when I say without any effort on their part, I really mean it. I really mean being able to sort of stand back as the director of your life experience and direct the universe in such a way that the universe offers you everything you're wanting without you having to take any action to get that thing other than following the guidance which allows you to line up through joyful action in the time and space coordinates. Time and space are distortions, they are illusions. But anyway, line yourself up in the time and space coordinates in which the unfolding, the manifestation, is happening all on its own. And when you do that, you end up delighted and surprised. And that's what's happened with all of my manifestations, especially the castles. The buttons, not so much. So castles and buttons, these are categories of manifestations. Buttons, as buttons are in ordinary reality, buttons are numerous and relatively insignificant compared to castles. And as a result of those, that classification of manifestations are manifestations you don't pay very much attention to, and they manifest from desires that you don't have a whole lot of resistance about. And so those manifestations occur very, very easily and often very quickly because you don't have a lot of resistance and you're not doing anything to hold them at bay. Those are buttons. And you also have a lot of them. And so those kind of manifestations are happening all the time. You just don't pay much attention to them. And because of that, they happen quickly and they're numerous. Castles, on the other hand, are desires that you have really strong desire for and simultaneously a lot of resistance about. And so those things, the castles, tend to manifest more slowly. So I was speaking particularly about the castles in my life that I'm manifesting, and every one of them is coming in a state of effortlessness. And when they show up, I am imminently surprised. So I'm going to get to the instruction in a minute here, but I just want to amplify what I just talked about with an example. I'm going to use some props here. So if you've watched my channel, you probably know that back in January, someone stole my bike out of the apartment bike room. The bike was replaced. The apartment took responsibility for that happening and ended up purchasing a bike, giving me cash so that I could purchase a bike, and a replacement bike. And the bike that I replaced it, the bike that was stolen with, is far, far better than the bike I had. It's the same brand of bike, the same model, but it's just a newer version, and it has all the bells and whistles and much more delightful and satisfying than the bike I had, which also was extremely satisfying. But in between January, when the bike was stolen, and when I bought the new bike, and then today, something really interesting happened. And that's what I want to use these props to illustrate. Now I'm offering this manifestation in order to set up the instruction I'm going to give. Okay? So as part of the bike that I had before, I had these bike bags. And these bike bags, they're pretty good bags. They're not the best bags in the world, but they're pretty good. And I'm just going to move the microphone so that you can hear me better. And these bike bags have these hooks on the back. The hooks are typically covered by rubber, this little rubber thing. But as I was using these bike bags, one of the rubber things fell off, as you can see right here. The rubber thing fell off. And so I was using the bike bag without that rubber thing, and I realized that the rubber thing, since it was not there, I was starting to scratch my bike rack. And so I put some electric tape on that metal thing that you saw a moment ago and continued to use the bike bag. In the meantime, I set the intention that I wanted to replace that rubber thing with a replacement. Now, remember, I'm telling this story in order to set up the instruction. This is really important that you hear this. When I noticed that the rubber thing was missing, I tried to make it happen. I tried to replace the rubber piece through effort. And the first thing I tried to do was remember where I bought the bags from. I bought the bags here in Portland, but I couldn't remember where the location of the manufacturer's facility was. I couldn't remember. I also tried to remember the name of the bags. There's no name on the bags. There's a logo on the bags, and I even tried to snap a photo of the logo and use Google photo search to find the name of the company, and I could not. I even went to the place where I bought the bicycle to see if they could help me find the bags, and they could not. So what I was doing here, this is turning out to be partly instruction, what I was doing here was trying to make it happen through action. I was trying to replace the rubber part. This is what most people try to do when they are wanting something to exist in their life experience, whether it's an experience or a person or an event or something like that. That's what I was doing. I was trying to make this happen. The frustration that was coming of that is what caused me then to let go of the idea of trying to make it happen. And instead, I set the intention that at some point I would rendezvous with a new rubber piece. I set the intention. Now, this was 3 years before my bike was stolen. And all of that time that I spent trying to make it happen, trying to find a new rubber piece, I was putting resistance on the trail of rendezvousing with a new rubber piece. I was trying to make it happen. And when I was trying to make it happen, I was feeling frustration. Remember, I'm setting up the instruction. I was feeling frustration, and that frustration was telling me something, but I wasn't paying attention to the frustration. Instead, I was trying to make it happen by finding this rubber piece. And so I was putting resistance on my trail. This was 3 years ago. In the meantime, I continued to ride with the electrical tape around that metal piece I showed you a moment ago to protect my bike rack from being scratched. So then I set the intention, like I said, that I would rendezvous with a new rubber piece to replace the one that had fallen off. Flash forward to after this bike that I was using, these bike bags, got stolen. It's now June. The bike has long since been replaced. I'm deeply satisfied with my new bike, and my new bike bags are far superior to these bags I just showed you. They're made in Germany. They're high precision. They have all kinds of bells and whistles, and more importantly, they each of the two bags carry twice as much as these bags that I had before. So I was deeply satisfied. Remember, this is instruction. I'm giving you instruction in the midst of setting up the instruction with this example. I was deeply satisfied with these new bike bags and deeply satisfied with my new bike. So one day in June, this was 2 weeks ago, I was walking along the Portland waterfront and just having a good time like I usually do when I go on walks on beautiful Sunday Portland days, listening to music in my AirPods, looking at the beautiful sights on this waterfront. And there's a particular part of the waterfront that's on a floating bridge. And I was walking on this floating bridge, looking at the beautiful river, the Willamette River, and I got an impulse to look down at the surface of the bridge that I was walking on. I looked down at the surface of the bridge and I saw this object that immediately I knew what it was. It was like the dimensions, like the measurements, the shape of it, the color, the material that it was made out of. I knew that it was what it was, which was this. It was the exact replacement rubber for this bag, and it fits perfectly. Look, it fits perfectly. It's exactly the same length as the other one, and it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly on there. It's a little loose now because you have to pull the metal back to push it further in, as this one is. But you can see it fits perfectly. So when I saw that on the ground, I instantly knew what it was. I picked it up and stood there astonished that 4 years later, I manifested this rubber piece. How it got there it's just astounding to me when I think about this. This is more astounding to me as a manifestation than me moving the federal agency that I talked about in my last Worthiness Wednesday episode. This is one of the most profound manifestations I have created for myself because it seems so insignificant. And yet the universe, with all its precision, delivered this rubber piece in a timing that was delightful and surprising. Now, notice something about this manifestation. It came 4 years after I set the intention. Why did that happen? It happened because when I immediately noticed that the rubber piece was missing, I tried to make it happen. And in trying to make it happen, I felt frustration. That frustration was trying to tell me something I wasn't paying attention to. And as a result of that, I had laid down resistance that delayed the manifestation. The manifestation of this rubber piece didn't have to take so long. It didn't have to take as long as me getting my bike stolen and then getting a new bike that was better than the last one and then getting new bike bags that were better than my previous ones. It didn't have to take all of that. But the reason why it took all that time is because I had put down resistance that was holding back the manifestation. So now let's get into the instruction. By the end of this video, you're going to understand. So I write down the objectives of what I'm going to share to make sure I share it all. So if you're interested in following along to make sure you get everything that I promised, you can look in the description of this video, and these objectives that I'm about to read are there. I'm going to talk about how manifestations happen, and then I'm going to give you the key steps in the process of manifestation to look for so that you don't go astray and put the kibosh on your manifestation like I did with regard to that rubber piece. Then I'm going to talk about why knowing these key points are really important, why they're helpful, crucial actually. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how to align with the natural unfolding of your manifestations so that they flow into your life easily and more quickly. But remember, all manifestations are happening in divine timing. The divine timing is determined by when you line up with it, which is one of the reasons why it took 4 years for this rubber piece to manifest. So let's start by looking at that. The reason why it took so long for the rubber piece to manifest was because by the time I had replaced my bike that was stolen, enjoyed the joy of riding that new bike and of using my new bike bags, constantly being delighted by the features of those bike bags, I had completely soothed the resistance I had that I had built up in trying to make replacing the rubber piece happen. So this is the thing. Manifestations, we're going to talk about how manifestations happen. Manifestations are nothing more than the furthest forward evolution of your focus. Another word for focus is what you put your attention on. It's not so much your focus that causes your manifestations to happen. It's what you put your attention on. You are a manifesting machine. I'm using machine lightly. My broader perspective is don't call people machines. It's true. You're not a machine. You're a manifesting process. You're a process of manifestation. And you cannot help but manifest because you are a God in human form. And anywhere you put your attention, which is pure positive energy, is going to create more of what you're putting your attention on. And so, whether you're focused on it or not, if you put your attention on something, by virtue of you putting your attention on that thing, you're going to cause that thing to expand. And it doesn't matter if that thing is physical or non-physical. You've probably heard New Agers say it doesn't matter to your creative power whether or not what you're focusing on is something that you can see and feel and touch, or whether it's in your imagination. The power of your manifestation can't tell the difference. And so that's what I'm saying here. Whatever you put your attention on is going to become more until it becomes physical. That's how thoughts turn into things. This is why oftentimes people manifest things they say in their right mind that they wouldn't manifest, because they're not aware that they're putting their attention on something they don't want to manifest. And because they're putting their attention on it, even though they don't want it to manifest, that thing manifests. And then they double down on the manifestation by being upset about the fact that it manifested, or being, in other ways, in negative emotion, which causes them to focus even more their attention on that thing they don't want, which means they get more of what they don't want. Because anything you put your attention on is going to become more until it physically manifests. Now, why does it manifest? It manifests so that you can see what it is you're doing in non-physical through your attention, because you are wanting to know and learn how to be proficient with your attention. Because in non-physical reality, there is no resistance, or comparatively very, very little compared to physical reality. And so in non-physical reality, you are able to manifest instantly. And if you're willy-nilly with your attention, you can create for yourself an extremely unpleasant experience in non-physical as a result of having sloppy attention. So one of the things you're here to do is to learn how to be discerning with your attention, and to learn how to focus your attention. So manifestations show up in physical manifestations I'm referring to. They show up as a way for you to learn how to better use your attention being your creative power, your creative ability. So that's why manifestations show up. And that's how manifestations show up. Manifestations are simply a result of your attention. The more you focus on something with your attention, the more that thing will manifest. Now, to get a little more deeply into the how of it, when you focus on something, you are summoning life force. You're also aligning yourself with the energy represented by that thing that you're creating in your attention. Now, at this moment, I'm not talking about things you put your attention on in physical reality. I'm talking about things you put your attention on in non-physical reality while you're in a physical body. We humans call those things thoughts and beliefs and imagination. When you put your attention on something in a thought, belief, or imagination, you instantly create that thing in non-physical. And if you keep holding your attention on that thing, whether it's a thought or an imagination or belief, that thing, the thought, belief, or imagination is a living thing. It's not a living thing like you are. It's not made of biological matter, but it's still alive like you're alive as pure positive energy. So when you focus on that thing, the imagination or thought, that thing becomes more, and it enjoys the affinity you bring by focusing your attention on it. And as a result of focusing your attention, it begins focusing its attention on itself. And then, over time, momentum ensues. This is why sometimes it's hard for you to not think about something that you're thinking about, or to not fantasize about something that you fantasize about. Or when you fantasize about something and you keep on coming back to that fantasy, this is the result of momentum. So when enough momentum builds up, then your thought or imagination becomes a belief. And once it becomes a belief, then it is on the way to manifesting as a full-blown physical experience. Most of what I just described is a result of the universe co-creating with you. So when you conjure an imagination or a thought, the universe immediately, now when I say universe, I'm not talking about the stars and the other planets and suns and galaxies and nebula and stuff like that. I'm talking about the stuff underlying all of that and more. The aware conscious energy that makes up all that is. That's what I'm talking about when I use the word universe. So when you conjure an imagination, the universe immediately gets moving to fulfill that imagination, because every imagination, every thought is fulfilled in one dimension or another. And there is a lot of co-creation that's going on. I would say 98% of that was my broader perspective who brought up that percentage, 98% of the orchestration that is occurring to fulfill your desire is happening on behalf of the universe. It's assembling all the cooperative components, all of the other living things that are pure positive energy that want to get in on the act of fulfilling that which is your imagination. And all of those cooperative components are coming together, which also contributes to the building of momentum, because those cooperative components, as they come together, they're also focusing on the imagination you've created. And part of the cooperative components of the fulfillment are the human beings that are wanting to participate in your imagination. That rubber piece that I found had to have come from somewhere. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Someone had to have it on their bike and drop it. And so that person was a cooperative component to my unfolding. That's why some New Agers, when they lose something, they say, oh, someone must have wanted that thing, and that's why I lost it. So there's a lot happening that contributes to the how of manifestation. There's a whole lot more I could talk about. I could do an entire live on the how of how manifestation works and get into minute detail on how the universe makes your manifestations happen. But I've shared enough. You now know how manifestations happen, how they happen. So now let's talk about the key steps of the process and what to look for as you're focusing on your attention on that thing, the imagination or the thought that you want to happen. And by the way, these processes, everything I've just said up to now, also works with regard to you manifesting something you don't want. And this is why it's so important to know whether or not what you're focusing on is something you want or you don't want. Because anything that you put your attention on is going to happen eventually. So now, what are the key steps in the process? The first thing is being aware of your thoughts. That should make sense, because everything that manifests first begins as a thought in your head. So you really want to be clear of what you're putting your attention on and what you're thinking. That's why my clients and I do a lot of work about realizing what their thoughts and beliefs are. Another step in the process is recognizing how you feel as a result of the thought you're thinking. Your emotions are telling you something very important, and you really want to know. Generally speaking, negative emotion is telling you that the manifestation that's on the way is going to be a manifestation you're not going to like. Positive emotion tells you the opposite. It tells you that the manifestation that's on the way is going to be something you're going to enjoy. So those are two of the key steps in the process to be aware of. They're early warning mechanisms, so to speak. Being aware of what you're thinking and being aware of how you feel about what you're thinking. Now, at a certain step in the process of receiving a manifestation, what I'm about to say is inevitable. It comes in varying degrees. So in some manifestations, it's stronger than others. And this is where many people who try to manifest something fuck up. On the way to the manifestation, many times you're not up to speed with the manifestation you desire. In other words, you're not aligned with it. And so in order to get you aligned with it, the universe will serve up something that will cause you, if you're alert, it will cause you to double down on your desire. But if you're not alert, this step in the process will cause you to delay or even almost indefinitely postpone the manifestation. So this step is really important. And what this step usually looks like as a manifestation on the way to your fulfillment of your manifestation, what it usually looks like is what I call contrast. Now, human beings typically experience contrast as a negative experience, as something they don't want. And this is one of the things we talk about in the positively focused practice. We talk about how to turn that perception into a positive, how to recognize that contrast is good. So on the way to a manifestation, often what will happen is you will have an experience of contrast. You'll have an experience of a negative experience relative to your desire. For example, one of my clients was in the process of manifesting a vice president's position in his company. He wanted to make more money, and he wanted a position that recognized the important role he plays in his company. The fulfillment of that desire was moving very quickly, and I could see it, but my client was having trouble seeing it. And at one point, after he got the promotion, the way he got it was amazing. And by the way, this story I'm telling you is going to come out on Wednesday in the Worthiness Wednesday playlist. When he got the promotion, he was overjoyed. And in our conversation about it, he said, for a little while there, I didn't think it was going to happen. And I said, why didn't you think it was going to happen? And he described how the current situation with the tariffs and the war in Iran and other circumstances he believed were causing corporations to kind of shrink their strategic, near-term strategic plans. But this client doesn't understand that those kinds of external circumstances have nothing to do with receiving a manifestation. You are sovereign relative to your manifestations. And if you don't understand that word sovereign, it would be a really good idea to look that word up right now. So the client expressed doubt. He was experiencing contrast in that moment. He was experiencing a key step in the process of manifestation, which was the universe was offering him insight into the beliefs he had that were preventing the fulfillment of his manifestation. They were things he had to work through and able to realize what it was he wanted, this vice president position. So, on your way to a manifestation, you will inevitably, especially castles, you will inevitably experience contrast. A common form, well, this is really good. My broader perspective just told me this. A common form of contrast is delay. A common form of contrast is what appears to be an apparent delay. It looks like your manifestation isn't happening. That's contrast. That's what's causing, that's an opportunity for you to double down on what it is you want so that you can become aligned with what's unfolding. Now, this delay serves multiple purposes, one of which is gives you time to tune your desire so that you get specifically what you want. Another reason for the delay is it takes some time in physical reality for the cooperative components to assemble. But the way I'm defining time right now, the time delay, is that it is contrast. It gives you an opportunity to really focus on that which you're wanting. But you can see, if you think about it, you can see most people who are trying to manifest something give up because of the time delay. They conclude it's not happening. That's a problem. And then they don't get what they want. And then they conclude that manifestation doesn't work. So the time delay is often a big point of contrast that causes people to trip up. Another thing that causes people to trip up is what appears to be something that stands in the way. So now, last week I published a Worthiness Wednesday episode about me moving a federal agency, the VA, in my favor. And in that story, I talked about how an employee of the VA literally told me that I could not get what I wanted with regard to the appointment date and time that I wanted. He literally told me that I couldn't get it. That was the experience I knew of what I'm talking about, this key moment in the unfolding of this manifestation. And my reaction to it was masterful. I did not allow what this person was telling me to shake me. I did not allow it to shake me from my knowing that I would get what I want. Now, if you think about it, most people, when someone in authority tells them something, they'll accept the authority's perspective. And when they do that, think about attention, they put their attention on that which they're not wanting. And then they get that. And then again, they conclude that manifestation doesn't work. Another example, this apartment that I'm living in. I knew from a dream that I would live in this apartment. I didn't know where it was until they started building the building. When they started building the building, I knew I would have this apartment, this specific apartment, this specific unit with this specific view. I dreamt it. And as they were building it, I knew it would happen. And when I met with the leasing manager, her joy of meeting me was confirmation. But then when I applied for the apartment, there was a bunch of rigmarole that the compliance people wanted me to walk through. Now, my case is unusual because I'm a small business owner instead of an employee, so they had to verify my income. But I didn't get all upset or impatient about having to go through that process. Instead, I knew that this was the contrast that was causing me to line up specifically with what I'm wanting. And then when I came to pick my apartment, this specific apartment wasn't available. The leasing manager showed me a different apartment. And even then, I didn't collapse into that manifestation, that contrast. I just held firm vibrationally. And that's when the apartment manager goes, "Oh, wait, there's another apartment I can show you that's on the 7th floor. The person who applied for it didn't qualify. Let's go take a look at it." And it was this apartment. So this is a key step in the process of receiving your manifestation, which is contrast shows up. And what you do in that key step is really important. The final key step is following your impulses. Now, it's important to understand impulses. You can be aligned with something other than your broader perspective and receive an impulse. A school shooter is following their impulse. A rapist is following their impulse. But those impulses aren't coming from their broader perspective. They're coming from somewhere else. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. The point is, you really want to be aware of what your impulses are. And you want to be maximally tuned into your broader perspective so that you get the right kind of impulse. This is why the positively focused framework is so important. It's because it allows clients to be able to discern impulses from their broader perspective from other impulses. Another source of not good impulses is momentum. So like some people call impulses addictions. Those are impulses from something other from your broader perspective. They're the manifestation of momentum. And so it's really important to be able to understand, to know where your impulses are coming from. The good thing about the positively focused practice is that when you're really in it, you weed out the source of your impulses. You only receive impulses from your broader perspective. And so you can rely on them, you can trust them, you can believe them. So this key step in the process is understanding your impulses and immediately following them. And with practice, following your impulses can become second nature. And the reason why this is a key component in the process of manifestation is because the impulses you're receiving from your broader perspective are what's guiding you to the unfolding of the manifestation. There was a specific timing that allowed me to rendezvous with that piece of rubber that was on the waterfront bridge. I had to be on, think about that. That walk was 4 miles long. I had to rendezvous at that point on that floating bridge after the person had dropped the rubber piece. Think about that. There's some divine timing there. So my impulse to go on a walk had to be perfectly timed. I was about three and a half miles into that walk. So that timing had to be orchestrated by my broader perspective. The impulse to go on a walk had to occur such that 3.5 miles into the walk, I would rendezvous with that rubber piece. Can you see that? Now, with this manifestation in mind, but also especially with manifestations like meeting your lover, all the cooperative components are in constant motion. So if you receive an impulse, for example, to go to a grocery store, and you don't take the impulse to go, but instead go an hour later, it is guaranteed you're going to miss the rendezvous. Can you see how important it is? It's really important that you be aware of your impulses, be aware of where your impulses are coming from, and when you get an impulse, follow it. Because that impulse it's the final message for you to rendezvous in the time and space coordinates. I talked about this at the beginning. In the time and space coordinates where the fulfillment of the manifestation is occurring. This is so good. This is so good. So I said that was the final, knowing your impulses was the final process, but there's one more I need to talk about to share with you. And that is amplifying your recognition of the fulfillment of your manifestation. So when the manifestation occurs, you don't want to just brush it off as coincidence. You want to wring the hell, W-R-I-N-G. You want to wring the hell out of that manifestation. You want to amplify the fact that you've recognized that this manifestation happened. Me talking about this rubber piece on my live today, that's me doing this final step in the process. You want to revel in the fulfillment of the manifestation. Why do you want to do that? Because you're building momentum, you guys. You're putting your attention on the fulfillment of the manifestation, which then builds the momentum for you to be able to perceive future manifestations and also perceive the unfolding of the manifestation so that then you can become more fine-tuned to the whole process of manifestation. All right. So I've talked about the key steps. It's really, 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 really important that you understand those key steps, especially the delay, the time delay. Okay, the third thing I was going to share with you is why is it important? Why is it helpful to know these key steps? Hopefully that it makes sense now. That's a foregone or a no-duh kind of thing to share. Knowing these steps, what the key steps are, will allow you, when the key steps occur in your unfolding, to not go in the wrong direction. It'll keep you from going in the wrong direction. It'll keep you, knowing these steps will keep you from encountering the step and then putting the kibosh on your manifestation because you don't understand what's happening in that step. Can you see that? Every one of those steps, if you don't know what the step is, you're more than likely going to do the wrong thing in that key moment. With regard to the delay, you're going to probably think your manifestation is not happening. When you think your manifestation is not happening, your attention is on something you don't want. And then the negative emotion you feel is telling you, it's an early warning, it's telling you the manifestation that's coming is not going to be what you like. And the manifestation it's talking about is the absence of your manifestation. So the time delay is a key moment. The contrast that shows up, that's a key moment. You have to be able to change your belief, your thought about what contrast, the negative experience is. It's not negative. It's a key inflection moment. Every single one of the key steps in the process that I talked about is a key component to getting your manifestation. And so why do you want to know them? So that when they show up, when those key moments show up, you double down on receiving the manifestation. Well, that was an easy one. Now, let's talk about how to align with the natural unfolding of manifestations. In 3 words, it's the positively focused framework, basically. Learning how to become what I call positively deranged. Positively deranged is how all that is. It is unwaveringly focused on knowing that everything that happens in all that is positive because it is. And because it is, it is. In order to align with the natural unfolding of manifestations, aligning with the natural unfolding of manifestations requires that you become ultimately positive, pushing against nothing. This is very, very hard for human beings to do because we're conditioned to solve problems. I didn't say it is inherent in us to solve problems. I said we're conditioned, we're taught to solve problems. But if you've listened this far into this live, you know solving problems isn't your job. Your job is to focus attention. Everything else that happens after that is not your job. So you don't have to solve any problems. In fact, thinking there's a problem is pushing against something, isn't it? So you have to get to the point where you don't see any problems in order to be naturally aligned to the natural unfolding of manifestations. And to some degree, you already are. Some of the buttons that all that is would describe as a castle is the fact that you wake up every day. The fact that you breathe every moment without you having to pay attention to it. The fact that all of your bodily processes function naturally without you having to make them happen. The fact that you have ample oxygen to breathe, ample sunlight to power the biological energies that make this world work. The fact that you have billions of people on this planet doing all kinds of things that contribute to your life experience. All of these things are happening without you having to do anything about them. These are buttons, but they're also castles because they are the sustaining features of your life experience. So you already are, to some degree, aligned with the unfolding of everything you want. But when it comes to your personal, intimate life experience and your personal desires, more often than not, you do not carry that alignment into those. And that's what the positively focused framework is about. It's ultimately about getting you to realize your entire purpose for being here, which I talked about at the beginning of this live, which is to learn how to become aware that you are what you are, which is a God in human form, here in human form, to learn to become the God that you are. Pure positive energy in a state of constant expansion for the joy and the contribution of expansion of all that is. Oh. When you realize what I have realized and what my clients are realizing, life becomes so satisfying. But more than that, you guys, you begin to become aware that there's more to being than this life. I woke from a series of dreams this morning that were so phenomenally rich, vivid, and satisfying, and informing more of what I am to myself. I woke from those dreams feeling such deep satisfaction about my being. It caused my life experience to pale in comparison. And it should, because life experience, this life we have, is not the main event, you guys. This is a training ground, and you're here for the purpose of something that's much greater than the things that are going on in this planet. Make no mistake, It's important that you're here, else you wouldn't have come. And the things that are happening here are in your favor. But there's nothing significant happening on this planet that demands that you focus all your attention here. And you are predisposed to not have all your attention here, which is what my clients are discovering, and it's what I have discovered. And when you get to that point where you've discovered what I've discovered, then you have a broader awareness of all that's going on and all that is. And that awareness is so satisfying. So today we've talked about how manifestations happen, how manifestations become manifestations, and your role in them. I've shared with you an example from my own life, actually several examples, to illustrate the points I've made in this live. This is one worth watching over. I know it was long, but this is instruction. And for those of you who have made it this far, you have created for yourself a resonance with the teachings that are universal, teachings that speak to the fundamental principles, the fundamental spiritual principles underlying how all that is works. Oh, it's so good. Yesterday, I went to see the movie Disclosure Day, and in that movie, one of the main characters talks about how the universe is based on mathematics. It is not based on mathematics. Mathematics is a language that humans created in order to try to understand how the universe works. The universe is based on spiritual fundamental principles, and those principles have nothing to do with math. It looks like math is the language because the fundamental spiritual principles are so precise. And when you get your vibrational fingers on those principles, you become unstoppable. You can create the smallest, finest, most precise manifestation you want, as well as the biggest, the most grand, the most seemingly impossible manifestation you desire. But you have to understand how those manifestations happen in order to get to the fulfillment. And that's what I have learned, and that's what I'm teaching my clients to learn. If you want to know more, if you want to get in on the fun, feel free to become a client. I've included links in the description of my YouTube video, my YouTube channel, where you can test drive a client session. Or if you're ready, you can become a client. And no matter what you do, I know you're having the best life imaginable for you. And ideally, we'll see each other again in my next video.